Welcome to Medieval History Channel 97, where the echoes of the past come alive. Step into the world of knights, castles, and forgotten legends as we journey through time together. Let history speak. Hey friends, tonight we're stepping into the blistering heart of the past, into the soot-stained, muscle-burning, endlessly smoky world of a man who didn't just live through the Middle Ages, he shaped it, quite literally, the medieval blacksmith. Now I know what you're picturing, the Hollywood version. A rugged figure bathed in golden firelight, hammering steel in slow motion while sparks fly like fireworks in a dream. Maybe there's epic music swelling in the background, and he wipes a single bead of sweat from his brow like a hero in a saga. Let me stop you right there, because real blacksmithing, in a real medieval village, it was no cinematic training montage. It was raw, back-breaking, soul-grinding labor. It was burns on top of blisters, smoke in your lungs, and the unshakable scent of iron and sweat clinging to every inch of your body. It was brutal. It was relentless. And for most blacksmiths, it was the only life they knew. And they didn't get to choose it. But before we dive headfirst into the forge, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly vibe with this kind of storytelling. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing this little global village of ours come to life. All right, now, dim your lights. Maybe turn on a small fan to mimic that forge side hum. Let's settle in and travel back to a world lit by fire and forged in iron. Imagine this. You were born not into royalty or wealth, but into fire, into the smoke-wreathed legacy of blacksmiths. No castles, no scrolls bearing your name, no inheritance save for the family hammer, and a workshop that smells like scorched earth and molten steel. Your cradle is just out of range of the furnace. Your lullaby is the steady rhythm of hammer against iron, over and over and over again. By the time you can toddle on 2 feet, you're already learning how to dodge flying embers. By 6 years old, you're officially apprenticed, which is medieval code for free labor with soot permanently embedded in your skin. Your toys are rusted tongs. Your sandbox is a floor of ash and bone-dry dirt. Your favorite game? Not dying. While other kids in the village chase geese or throw pebbles into streams, you're learning to breathe through smoke and keep your balance near a forge hot enough to melt your sandals. Every lesson is a risk. Every mistake has a scar. And the games you play? Oh, they're fun. Guess how hot this is by sticking your hand near it. Hold the hammer until your arms go numb. Try not to cry when your nail comes out crooked for the 5th time today. Your father, the master blacksmith, is a mountain of a man, built from calluses and sheer willpower. He doesn't waste words. He doesn't have to. A grunt means you're doing okay. A sigh means you're messing up. And his most commonly used phrase, barked like a battle cry, is simply, hit it harder. There's no coddling here. No pats on the back. Just heat, metal, rhythm, and the pressure of generations behind you. Because this isn't just a job. This is legacy. This is survival. This is the craft that holds the world together. Every horseshoe, every plow, every sword or nail, it starts here in this firelit cave with a boy learning to shape steel and himself. He's got hands like tree bark, gnarled, calloused, tough as ironwood, the kind of hands that tell stories without needing words. Every scar is a chapter, every burn a lesson. His face carries a permanent scowl, not just from temperament, but from years breathing in soot, smoke, and disappointment, the kind that comes with unpaid debts and ungrateful clients. Decades of glaring at glowing embers and dodging tax collectors have carved trenches into his brow deeper than any forge line. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's with the weight of steel. And if you're lucky enough to be the one he teaches, you don't get instructions, you get immersion. He shows you how to shape iron with precision, how to coax flame like it's a living thing, how to shut your mouth and nod when a pompous knight critiques your handiwork without ever having held a hammer in his life. You don't ask questions. You don't even think of it. Curiosity gets you nothing but a horseshoe thrown at your head and a week of silence that feels heavier than a sack of coal. You learn with your eyes. You memorize with your body. You obey because the fire has no patience for hesitation, and neither does he. Holidays? That's a fairy tale whispered by the wind outside the forge door, the one that never quite closes right. The forge doesn't rest. Not for holy days, not for sickness, not even for storms. Metal bends when it's hot, and so must you. There's always something broken, something dull, something desperate to be reforged. And you are the tool behind the tool. Your hands don't get days off, they get blisters. You start to understand that free time is a myth. What people call breaks, you call transitions, the thin sliver of breath between one job ending and the next one beginning. The forge teaches discipline, yes, but what it really drills into your bones is pain tolerance, heat resistance, and the baffling ability to fall asleep standing upright with a hammer still in your hand. By the time you're 10, your skin smells permanently of smoke and sweat, like you've been marinated in the forge itself. You swear like a drunk miner, because that's who you mostly hear talking, and your arms, thick, knotted things, can haul water buckets heavier than the dog you used to have. The one that bolted years ago, spooked by the constant clanging and never came back. Can't really blame him. This is your life now. No contract, no choice. Welcome to the family business, where love is shown through grunts, pride is hidden beneath layers of grime, and the heirloom isn't gold, it's a lifetime of aching joints. Hope you like the perfume of scorched leather, the taste of ash in your mouth, and the promise of 70 years of back pain. It's not a job. It's a sentence passed down through generations, sealed with soot and sweat. If you thought childhood meant running barefoot through fields or carving sticks into swords, think again. In the world of a medieval blacksmith, childhood is more myth than memory. The moment you can lift a bucket without tipping over, you're enlisted. Drafted into a war against molten metal and impossible expectations. Toys, games, joy, those are luxuries for sons of lords and sons of shepherds. Your playground is a shed darkened by smoke and echoing with the ring of metal against metal. Your jungle gym is a rack of rusting tongs that could crush a toe, perched dangerously close to a pit of glowing coal. Misstep once and you don't just burn, you learn. Fast, painfully, viscerally. You learn how long it takes for skin to blister and how long it takes for your father to notice. One is always faster. Your job title might be apprentice, but don't let that fool you. What it really means is this: you do the things no one else wants to do, and still get blamed when something goes wrong. You stoke the flames until your eyes sting. You pump the bellows till your arms go numb. You sweep floors already blackened beyond saving. You clean tools that feel older than time. You restack coal in the heat while your clothes stick to your skin, and somehow you still get yelled at for missing a spot. And this is before breakfast. You don't get medals, you don't get praise. You get paid in food, in stern nods, and the occasional grunt of mild approval. Those brief, gravelly sounds that, in blacksmith language, mean something like, "You didn't completely ruin that today." And honestly, that's about as close to a compliment as it gets. Outside, the world moves on without you. The village kids, the ones you used to chase down dirt paths and splash in riverbanks with, are out in the fields now. Maybe they're throwing sticks. Maybe they're learning how to milk goats with clumsy hands and hopeful hearts. You catch glimpses of them sometimes, laughing, wild-haired and sun-drenched, and you envy them, even if they do smell like cheese and manure. They might grow up to be farmers or shepherds. Honest jobs, hard ones, sure, but they don't involve glowing hot metal or the sudden sting of molten sparks landing on bare skin. Their work doesn't come with blisters, burns, and the ever-present ache in your shoulders that starts before sunrise and doesn't leave when the sun goes down. You, on the other hand, are learning to make nails. Nails, not swords, not horseshoes. Nails, thousands of them. Bent and misshapen at first, reheated and hammered again and again until they're straight enough to hold together someone else's barn door or chicken coop. You learn patience through repetition. You learn humility through failure. You learn that perfection isn't immediate, it's forged one mistake at a time. And if you're lucky, really lucky, your father, who is also your master, lets you swing a hammer by yourself, but only after he's pointed out every single thing you've done wrong, twice. Don't even try saying, "I'm tired." That phrase doesn't exist in the forge. Not here, not ever. Fatigue is weakness. Burnout is for candles. You push through, because that's what apprentices do. You swing, you sweat, you keep going. You try to smile, or at least try not to cry, at least not where anyone can see you. Because to your father and to the fire, you are no longer a child. You are an apprentice, a blacksmith in the making, and the making never ends. The forge isn't just where you work. It becomes who you are. It sinks into your skin, settles in your bones, stains your clothes, and reshapes your soul. It dominates your senses. The roar of the fire, the weight of the hammer, the rhythm of metal meeting metal. By the time you're in your teens, the forge no longer feels like a place. It feels like a living thing, a hot, smoky, temperamental beast that breathes in coal and spits out sparks, one you must learn to feed, respect, and fear, because if you don't, it will consume you. But if you keep showing up, keep swinging, keep enduring, then slowly, day by day, you begin to understand. The forge isn't just a place of labor. It's a crucible, a teacher, a sacred rite of passage. And through fire and steel, it is quietly shaping not just your hands, but the person you are becoming. The bellows wheeze with effort like lungs that never tire. The iron hisses when it hits the water, that sharp breath of relief that comes with every plunge. And the hammer, oh, the hammer, it strikes with a rhythm that echoes through your chest like a war drum. Not chaos. Music, brutal, relentless, but music nonetheless. A medieval symphony composed in heat, sweat, and steel. Your body doesn't just follow the rhythm, it belongs to it. Whether your mind is drifting or sharp as a blade, your arms know what to do. You swing, you press, you fold. The movements live in your muscle memory now, as natural as breathing. And the heat, it doesn't go away. It doesn't become kind. It just becomes normal. Not because it's easy, but because it's constant. You no longer flinch when it wraps around you like a second skin. You've accepted it, like gravity or pain or the passing of time. You know which stones sear flesh, which coals die too soon, which planks creak treacherously underfoot. Your body maps this place like a soldier knows the battlefield. Your skin no longer burns under the sun. It darkens under smoke. A slow branding by fire and labor. Your clothes are never clean. That same tunic, that worn leather apron, they smell of scorched wool, old grease, and something else no one dares name, the scent of your own resolve, of desperation turned to duty. You don't have many possessions. You don't need them. But you have the forge. Not in the legal sense. Your father's name is still on whatever scrap of parchment says who owns what, but in every way that matters, the forge owns you. It has your time, your breath, your youth, and strangely, you give it willingly. Silence becomes foreign. The hiss of quenching, the clang of metal, the steady crackle of fire, it becomes your heartbeat. And when it all goes quiet, something inside you twitches, like a dancer left without music, like you're missing a step in a lifelong choreography. Your friends, if any are still around, have stopped waiting. He's probably at the forge, they say, shrugging, and they're right. You live here more than anywhere else. This is where you wake, where you sweat, where you become. You're not a blacksmith. That title is too tidy, too small. You are the forge, a two-legged extension of fire and steel, of pressure and patience, flesh animated by flame. And strangely, unexpectedly, a part of you loves it. Not the pain, not the cracked skin or the stubborn blisters, but the moment when something takes shape beneath your hands, when the horseshoe curves just right, when the blade catches the light, newly born, when the metal, once stubborn and defiant, finally yields because of you. In those seconds, you are no longer just a soot-covered apprentice. You are a maker, a shaper of reality, a small but essential gear in the great machine of time, and that is everything. Then the moment passes, the stillness is gone. The next order arrives, and just like that, the fire roars back to life, hot, hungry, and unrelenting. You take a breath that doesn't even reach your lungs before it's time to move again, time to get back to work. By the time your friends are just starting to stretch into their teenage limbs, awkward and wide-eyed with possibility, yours already feel like they've weathered a lifetime. Not just grown, endured. Like they've been through a siege that no one else even noticed. While they're out chasing games and dreams, you're chasing heat, wielding weight, and learning how to live with pain as a companion. They're getting taller, stronger, with backs that still carry lightness and spring. You're getting stooped. You're getting scarred, you're getting stiff. Your muscles are thick, yes, but not in the glorious, battle-ready way of storybook nights. More like the heaviness of a boy who's been shaped not by fate, but by the hammer. Over and over and over again. Your arms don't hold swords, they carry anvils. At least that's what it feels like. And your back is a quiet tragedy. bent not by weakness, but by loyalty to a craft that demands everything and gives nothing for free. It bows from hours of hauling iron and leaning over flames. It whispers reminders with every motion. You were forged too. Just not in the way people like to romanticize. Your knees creak like old door hinges whenever you crouch. Your shoulders pop like cracked bone china every time you lift the hammer, which is to say, every few seconds. That sound, metal striking metal, joints grinding with effort, has become your personal soundtrack. No symphonies, no silence, just survival. And your hands, let's talk about your hands. You used to have fingers. Now you have something closer to claws, iron-tipped, gnarled, and permanently stained. Soot runs so deep into your skin that it feels like it's part of your blood now. Blisters burst and reform without ceremony. Cuts arrive like unwelcome guests, but you've stopped noticing. Burns are no longer events, they're part of your daily routine. As for your fingernails, half of them are blackened or gone. The rest are hanging on like battered flags after a storm. When someone hands you bread, soft, warm, meant to nourish, you hold it like it's made of glass and thorns. Not out of reverence, but because your joints can't handle pressure anymore. Every knuckle feels like it's been hexed. Tenderness has become a memory, not a reflex. There's no such thing as recovery time in this world. Pull a muscle, keep going. Twist your wrist, you've got another. The forge doesn't pause to check if your elbow is screaming. The iron doesn't care if your spine is threatening collapse. The work waits for no one. And sleep, you'd think after a day full of lifting, swinging, sweating, surviving, you'd collapse and drift off like a stone into a river. But you don't, because your body won't let you. The aching won't stop. The ringing in your ears, 10 hours of clanging and crashing, follows you into the dark. And your arms, they twitch in your sleep. Phantom swings. You're still fighting, even in your dreams. Still hammering ghosts, still forging things no one else will ever see. You ache in places you didn't know existed. You smell like fire and fatigue. Even your pain has learned how to ache. And what does your father say about this? Good. You're learning in a strange, grueling, almost brutal way, but learning nonetheless. What you're going through isn't something you survive in spite of. No. You're growing because of the pain, because of the exhaustion, the smoke, the grind. The very things that try to break you are the ones shaping you. You're not just becoming stronger, you're being forged like the metal beneath your hammer. It's not enough to heat it once. It takes fire, pressure, repetition, again and again, until it holds a new form. That's what's happening to you. The pain isn't just a side effect, it's the catalyst, the architect of who you're becoming. But let's not romanticize it too much. The truth is harsher than poetry. By the time you hit adulthood, your body already feels like it's survived 2 lifetimes and died halfway through both. Your bones creak with memories you haven't had time to process. Your muscles carry the weight of days no one will ever thank you for. And the worst part, this is just the beginning. In most jobs, smoke is a hazard. In yours, it's more like a colleague, an annoying, ever-present coworker who never takes a break. It doesn't just linger, it owns the place. It wraps around your throat, your clothes, your thoughts. The forge isn't simply hot. It's a chamber of endurance, a box where air becomes a privilege, not a guarantee. Every breath you steal comes laced with the fine perfume of coal dust, scorched steel, and something darker. Something like regret, or maybe resilience. If you can see more than 6 feet in front of you, chances are someone forgot to light the fire. Visibility is a luxury, not a norm. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that seems to let in more smoke than it lets out. You think about opening a window, but there isn't one. Just walls, blackened with soot. Your father's cough echoing off them like a warning. And every so often, a gust of wind barges in just to throw everything straight into your eyes. Your lungs? Let's just say they're in a long-term, toxic relationship with the air. At first it burns, then it stings, then one day it just becomes familiar. You stop noticing the damage because the damage is the environment. Coughing fits, part of the rhythm now, like a beat your body's learned to dance to. Black mucus? Not ideal. But hey, at least it's reliable. You've reached that strange threshold where clean air feels suspicious, like something's missing. Even your voice starts to betray you. It lowers, cracks, turns gravelly, the kind of voice that sounds like it was aged in a barrel of smoke and bad choices. You start sounding like a 60-year-old goat farmer who gargles boiling tar before breakfast. Every word you speak is a rasp. Every breath is shorter than it should be. And your throat? It always feels like it's hosting a dust storm, a swirling, relentless storm that never settles. But you keep working because you don't have the luxury of stopping. Because beneath all the grime and grit, this is your craft. This is how survival looks when dignity meets necessity. And it's not just the smoke from the fire. There's the metal dust from grinding, the kind that gets into your skin, your clothes, your bloodstream. There's the oil fumes from quenching red-hot steel. There's burnt leather, charred wood, singed cloth, all the ghosts of materials sacrificed to the flame. By noon, you've probably inhaled 3 different kinds of poison, and that's on a good day. But still, you rise, you show up, you keep shaping metal and being shaped in return. Because somewhere in all this smoke, in all this noise and heat and weight, there's a kind of truth, a kind of becoming. And that, more than anything else, is why you keep going. Protective gear, please. In this world, a rag tied loosely around your face is the only armor you've got. Flimsy, damp, and destined to betray you within minutes. It clings to your skin like a second mouth, one that breathes smoke and sweat instead of air. It soaks through, it stinks, and eventually it suffocates more than it protects. And so you rip it off, gasping, not for relief, but for the lesser evil. You breathe smoke instead of steam from your own pores. It's harder, sure, but it's cleaner, in a way only a blacksmith understands. Long-term damage? That's part of the deal. Asthma, black lung, a cough that wakes you in the middle of the night and lingers like a shadow in your ribs. These aren't possibilities, they're guarantees. They're baked into the profession like carbon into steel. But you're not counting years. You're counting swings of the hammer, the way it lands on hot iron with rhythm and rage. You're not worried about dying young, you're just worried your father will see how crooked that gate hinge turned out. In the forge, air isn't something you breathe, it's something you fight through. Every inhalation is a compromise, every breath tastes like charcoal and metal and the edge of exhaustion. But you keep breathing, not because you must, but because stopping would mean the hammer slips, the iron cools, and the rhythm breaks. Breathing is just the cost of hammering. By now, your tools are no longer tools. They're characters in your life. Your hammer, the one with the cracked handle and the dented face, might as well be your twin. You've cursed it louder than you've ever cursed a man. You've prayed over it when a strike had to be perfect. You've felt it bite back, especially now that your shoulder clicks when you lift it, like some ghost trapped inside your bones is rattling chains in protest. But still, the hammer is your identity. Without it, you're just another man standing half-naked in a choking hut, covered in ash. With it, you're something more. A maker, a bruised, blistered, bloodied creator of things that last longer than you ever will. And then there are the tongues, your least favorite dance partner. Awkward, slippery, always too hot to handle and too clumsy to trust. They pinch your fingers like they've got a grudge. You burn yourself more often than you grip the metal right. Every time the iron falls with a hiss onto the ground, you swear you'll throw those cursed things into the fire. But you never do. Because as infuriating as they are, you need them. That's the cruel bargain of blacksmithing. Every tool you hate is one you can't live without. The chisel, it's a memory. Once, it was sharp, precise, proud, gleaming. Now, it's worn down to a ghost of itself. But it still works. Not well. Not easily, but it gets the job done. You've used it to shape hinges and cut grooves, to carve details into blades, and on less noble days to jimmy open your neighbor's stuck door. It's more a habit than a tool now, a piece of your past that insists on remaining useful. Your workbench is a battlefield. Brakes, files, awls, punch tools, rivet sets, each one waiting for its moment to betray you, to slice your hand, stab your thigh, or roll off the table just in time to smash a toe. It looks less like a place to build things and more like something from an Inquisition chamber. And you're both torturer and victim. You bear the scars, not as decoration, but as proof that you belong here. Because in the end, blacksmithing isn't just a craft. It's a test of pain tolerance, of patience, of your ability to keep going even when your lungs burn, your fingers blister, and your shoulder clicks with every swing. You don't survive the forge, you become it. Your fingers remember now, not with thought, but with reflex. They twitch at the mere suggestion of a new tool, flinch before the steel even touches skin. It's not fear, exactly. It's something deeper. A kind of instinct, forged by repetition, by heat, by pain. Your hands have become their own creatures, scarred, calloused, and wiser than the rest of you. Your apron, the supposed shield between you and the madness, tries its best. But protection is a generous word. If by that you mean collecting molten metal fragments like souvenirs and pressing them into your ribs with the warmth of a smoldering embrace, then sure, it protects. It's no longer soft. The leather stiffens each winter until it creaks like old bones, until it feels more like armor salvaged from a battlefield than something crafted for work. And yet, despite the burns, the bruises, the grind, you treat your tools like sacred relics. Every evening, after the last clink fades and the forge cools, you line them up in reverent silence. You sharpen each blade, oil every hinge, whisper apologies to the hammer you dropped. Because in this world, a broken tool isn't just an inconvenience, it's a crisis. No tool means no work. No work means no coin. No coin means no food. So yes, your tools are your life, your silent partners, your steel-limbed comrades. But don't be fooled. They love you like fire loves wood. Wholly and destructively. They help you survive, yes, but they've also signed a slow, steady pact against your body. Every joint aches, your spine hums with fatigue, your sanity frays like worn rope, and still every morning they whisper in the rasp of metal, "We keep you alive, but we're also killing you." And you nod with a tired grin and cracked fingers and mutter, "Yeah, that sounds about right. Now pass the hammer." You don't wear a crown. You don't march into battle with a sword raised to the sky. You don't command armies. But make no mistake, without you, the village doesn't last a week. By Tuesday, everything falls apart. You are the quiet pulse behind it all. You are the blacksmith, not just a trade, a lifeline. You're the medieval version of customer support, IT help desk, mechanic, and therapist, wrapped in soot and sweat and a smell that never fully washes off. The knight cracks a blade in practice. You forge him a new one. The farmer's plow snaps on a root. You fix it before the crops fail. A monk's bell splits, a baker's oven handle breaks, a latch on the sheep pen refuses to shut. They all come to you, always to you. They never knock. They never ask if it's a good time. They show up mid-swing, covered in dirt and expectations, as if you've just been waiting, hammer in hand, heart wide open. I know you're busy, but could you just? The phrase that haunts your dreams, the anthem of the entitled. And still, you do it. Every time, not because they thank you, they rarely do. Gratitude is rare, fleeting. They assume this is your purpose, that you exist only to serve. If their door closes or their hoe holds through harvest, they nod like you should feel grateful. Like repairing their cracked bucket at dusk for half a crust of stale bread is some kind of divine privilege. Payment? It's a gamble. Sometimes coin. Sometimes a basket of eggs, sometimes just promises slippery and forgotten by the next market day. And yet, somehow you endure. Because beneath the exhaustion, the burns, the unspoken resentment, there is pride. Quiet, stubborn pride. In your skill, in your usefulness. In the fact that when the world breaks, you are the one they run to. Not the knight, not the priest, not the merchant. You. Because you are the firekeeper, the iron bender, the problem solver, the unthanked, overworked, unsung heartbeat of the village. And the forge, for all its cruelty, still sings your name. One man once paid you with a dead chicken. Said it was good for soup. It wasn't. It was tough, half-rotten, and smelled of hopelessness, but you took it anyway. Not because you wanted to, but because someone had to keep things running, even when the payment was a joke and the work was real. You've become the quiet solution to everyone's problems. The go-to fixer for issues that no one claims, that no one owns, but everyone needs solved. A bent hinge from someone's backside being too heavy for the garden gate? You fix it. A dagger snapped in half during a brawl at the tavern? You fix that too. A strange hunk of twisted metal pulled from the ground like it fell from the sky. No one knows what it is, but for some reason it absolutely must be mended. Still you. Always you. And yet, when the village lifts up names in gratitude, when songs are sung or praises offered, they speak of the knight who defended the bridge, the priest who blessed the harvest, or the miller whose goat grew unusually fat this season. But you are never mentioned, You are the clink of iron in the distance, the smoke rising from the edge of town. A necessity, a fixture, a tool, not a man. No one asks how your hands are holding up, how your back feels after lifting anvils and armor day after day. You are expected to endure because that is what the blacksmith does. But here's the truth. The quiet truth only you carry. Without your work, none of it would hold. The knight's armor would rust and fall apart. The priest's chapel would lose its hinges and its bell. The miller's carts would break before the grain could reach the stone. Their world, however loud and celebrated, is built on the silence of your labor. They don't sing songs about you, but their lives are stitched together by your hammer and tongues. Every stride their horses take, every nail in every beam of every home, all of it has passed through your hands. You'd think peace would be good news. No raiders, no bandits, no panicked nobles riding in on foam-covered horses demanding swords by sundown. But for you, peace is quiet in the worst way. It's the sound of coins stopping. It's the forge cooling, the anvil sitting untouched. You can mend a plow, sure, sharpen a sickle, straighten a hoe handle, but none of that pays what a single sword would. None of that keeps your children fed in winter. When war rages, the whole village turns to you for weapons, for armor, for protection they can hold in their hands. Even horseshoes wear faster when iron-shod hooves trample fields turned to battle. Your forge roars in those days, flames brighter than the sun, sweat pours, and so do the coins. You ache, you burn, you barely sleep, but your belly is full, and the debts at the alehouse are, for a while, forgotten. But war always ends, and when the fighting stops, so do the orders. The knights stop marching, the nobles stop demanding, and you're left with a farmer asking if you'll take 3 onions to sharpen the blade he hasn't replaced in years. You are the blacksmith, not the hero, not the poet, not the priest, but in the quiet bones of every home, in the iron veins of every tool and weapon, you are there, unseen perhaps, but indispensable. And that, in the end, is your legacy. And sure, you can make household goods, cauldrons, door handles, cooking spits, but there's not much profit in it. Those simple items, though essential, barely keep the forge's fire burning. Everyone wants you to work like a wizard, conjuring wonders from raw metal, shaping magic with every strike of the hammer. But they want to pay you like a stable boy, as if your skill and sweat are worth nothing more than the lowest labor. You become a negotiator, a beggar, and a merchant all at once, haggling for decent wages like your forge is just another stall at the bustling market. You learn the bitter taste of disappointment every time someone balks at your prices, eyes narrowing as if you've cast a dark spell over their precious coin. And don't even think about raising your prices. People look at you like you just cursed their cow. But you're just hammering metal, they say, as if molten iron bends itself into shape while humming church hymns, as if your craft requires no skill, no patience, no fire in the soul. The same hands that forged swords that defended kings now tremble quietly in frustration. You start to miss the chaos, not the blood, not the burning villages, but the steady flow of orders, the clear purpose, the rush of meaning in every strike. When knights lined up outside your forge, their dented shields clutched tightly, coin purses jingling with hard-earned gold, you mattered. You were a lifeline, a maker of legends. Now, in this fragile piece, you make keys for locked doors no one bothers to lock anymore, patch pots that should have long been thrown out, and fix tools so old they belong in a museum, not a field. The rhythm of battle, which once gave your work urgency and life, has faded into dull routine. Peace for everyone else means safety and rest. For you, it means economic anxiety, hunger gnawing at your belly and the cold sting of invisibility. And deep down, though you'd never say it out loud, part of you whispers in the quiet hours of night, wouldn't mind a small skirmish, just a little one, maybe a minor border dispute. Because when swords break, you eat. When armor dents, your hammer sings. When war calls, your craft calls with it. Some jobs have an end, a clear finish line, a task completed, followed by rest, applause, or at least a warm bowl of stew. Blacksmithing is not one of those jobs. It is endless, relentless. It is waiting in the shadows of peace for the call of chaos to return and breathe fire back into your weary soul. Your work is never done. Not today, not tomorrow, not even in your dreams. You fix one thing and 3 more fall apart. Patch the broken hinge on a gate, The cart it swings open for loses a wheel before you can stand up straight. Finish a batch of nails after hours of repetitive strikes. Someone shows up 5 minutes later asking for 10 more, longer this time, of course, and adds, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and I can't pay you till harvest." There is no endpoint, no sigh of completion, no neatly crossed off list, just the next fire, the next fix, the next exhausted breath. You rise before the sun even thinks about climbing over the hills, and you collapse well after it disappears behind the trees, leaving the world in cold silence. But even then, even in your precious few hours of sleep, your mind keeps hammering. You dream of clanging metal, of sparks in the dark, of unfinished tools and unpaid debts, of that one farmer who still owes you a dozen eggs, a decent thank you, and maybe a moment of patience. And even the so-called quick jobs, they never are. A villager strolls in, cradling a bent rake like it's a wounded animal. "Just a little fixing," they say with a hopeful grin. But you know better. You see the cracked tines, the warped neck, the heat splits in the handle. That little fix means at least 2 hours of reheating, reshaping, hammering, while nodding politely as they hover beside you asking, "Almost done?" every 5 minutes. And just when you think, finally, you might be able to sit for a moment, maybe drink something that isn't lukewarm, smoky, or flavored with ash, your apprentice comes tearing around the corner, breathless. The friar's horse threw a shoe. Of course it did, because you're the blacksmith, and here, blacksmith doesn't just mean metal worker, it means everyone else's last resort. The forge is not your workshop, it's a living thing. It demands your attention constantly. The fire won't stoke itself, the coals burn out if neglected. The bellows split in winter, the tools rust in spring, the anvil shifts when the summer sun swells the ground. Everything is either breaking, about to break, or quietly conspiring to. And even the sacred promise of rest, a day of peace, doesn't hold up under the weight of reality. Sunday is technically for church, for silence, for the soul. But then someone's ox cart snaps an axle on the way to market, and before you can blink, you're back in your apron, bleary-eyed, hammer in hand, hoping the priest doesn't pass by while you're working the Lord's day like any other. There's no to-do list here. That would suggest things ever get finished. They don't. This isn't a job. It's a cycle. Work, fix, repeat. Until your body gives out, or your hammer does. And the most painful, most complicated part? You kind of love it. You don't know who you'd be without the weight of the hammer in your hand, or the roar of the forge behind your ribs. You complain, you curse, you ache, but deep down, you'd rather live in the fire than anywhere else. You'd think that a life spent pounding iron, breathing flame, shaping the bones of a village, that would at least earn you two basic things, a hearty meal and a full night's sleep. But you'd be wrong. In the life of a medieval blacksmith, food and rest aren't rights. They're luxuries, like clean water, or shoes that fit, or customers who don't ask for miracles and pay with promises. Let's talk about food for a second. You burn calories faster than a runaway horse, sweat pouring out of you before noon, your muscles screaming by dusk. But what do you get? Some days you're lucky to gnaw on a crust of bread that hasn't gone stale. Other days, you eat whatever's left, if there's anything left. Because when the harvest fails, when the animals fall ill, when the village tightens its belt, your plate is the first to go empty. Not because people don't respect you, but because respect doesn't put stew on the table. And what do you get? A piece of coarse bread, so dry it scrapes the roof of your mouth. A bowl of cold pottage, thick and gray, with the sad hint of yesterday's turnip still floating somewhere in the murk. And maybe, just maybe, a sliver of salted pork if it's a special day, which of course it isn't. You eat standing up because there's no time to sit. One hand still clutching hot tongues, the other shielding your meal from the constant drift of ash that settles like snow from the forge. Meals aren't shared moments of connection. They're brief, silent pit stops. The food is fuel, and that's all it's allowed to be. Conversations, if they happen at all, are nothing more than grunts, a language made of exhaustion. And if someone knocks on the door mid-bite, panicked about a broken hinge or a stuck latch, you don't finish your meal. You set it down. You go to work. That stew's going cold, and you won't be the one to reheat it. You don't eat to enjoy. You eat to continue. Fuel in. Hammer out. Now, let's talk sleep, or whatever cruel imitation of it you're afforded. When you finally drag your aching body to the cot, your hands are still buzzing from hours of hammering. Your back feels like it's been folded wrong. Your ears echo with the day's metal music, a dull, ghostly ringing that won't let go. Your bed? A sagging straw sack that's either too flat, too lumpy, or crawling with something you'd rather not identify. Your blanket? A scorched wool sheet that smells like smoke, old ale, and something you once mistook for ambition. You close your eyes, desperate to disappear, but your mind has other plans. It replays the day's mistakes, the cracked hinge you meant to redo, the sword you left cooling too long, the wagon wheel that still hasn't been paid for. Sleep becomes a negotiation. You bargain with the darkness, asking for just a few hours of silence, and rarely getting them. And then come the interruptions. Always. A midnight knock because someone's horse threw a shoe, a gust of wind tearing a door off its frame, a noble demanding his blade sharpened now for a dawn hunt, because clearly you have nothing better to do at 3 a.m. You adapt. You learn to live on fragments, a stolen bite, a 5-minute nap, a breath that tastes like smoke. You run on stubbornness, on some unspoken inherited belief that the work must always come first. Productivity before nourishment, deadlines before dreams, food and sleep. They aren't breaks. They're just short intermissions between hammer swings. You eat when the fire allows, you sleep when the work forgets you, and always, always, you listen for the sound of the flame dying while you dream, because if it does, you'll wake up to more than cold. There was a time your hands were soft, once, long ago. Maybe when you were 5. Maybe never. Now they're tools in their own right. Stiff, swollen, cracked. Fingers that barely feel anything anymore, except when it hurts. And even then, not for long. You can't hold a quill. You can barely lace your own boots without wincing. But you can grip red-hot tongues with the casual confidence of someone who's been burned so many times that pain isn't a warning anymore. It's a companion, familiar, predictable, almost comforting in its consistency. Every joint in your hands cracks when you move, like old doors groaning open. Your knuckles look like they've been through bar fights and lost most of them. Your palms, a battlefield. Blisters stacked on top of blisters, some fresh and angry, others healed over, leathery and numb. They tell time like tree rings. Wondering what season it is? Count the burns. More than 5 blisters? Must be summer. You've lost fingernails like other people lose patience, some peeled off clean, others not so lucky. You remember once crushing your thumb so badly it turned a deep, ominous black, 2 whole weeks of throbbing pain. Did you stop working? Of course not. You just switched hands, growled through your teeth, and cursed at the iron like it was personal. And the cuts. Oh, the cuts never stop. Edges chip, files bite, blades slip. Sometimes you don't even notice until you see the blood on the anvil. A finger leaking again? Wrap it in a grimy cloth. Say a quiet prayer to whatever gods watch over fools and smiths and keep working, but nothing matches the burns. Some singe like a whisper. Quick. Forgettable. Others sizzle. They bubble. They carve scars so deep they become part of your fingerprint. You've branded yourself more times than you can count, and at some point, it just stopped being tragic. It became routine. Another mark. Another lesson. Your grip, at least, has become legendary. You can snap walnuts with a twitch, you've broken pliers just by being frustrated. But the price? Dexterity. Your hands tremble in the cold. You fumble with spoons, you drop coins, you can hammer a blade into shape, but you can't thread a needle if your life depended on it. You're 30 years old, but your hands belong to someone twice your age, someone who's fought 3 wars and lost all of them. And now you're playing tavern dice just to win a bowl of soup. But despite it all, despite everything, these hands are the reason you're still breathing. They shape swords, they mend gates, they raise the hammer that keeps your name alive. They ache every day, but they still work. And in this world, that's all that matters. You don't have to be whole, you just have to be able to swing. Let's be honest, you don't smell great. Actually, you haven't smelled clean since you were 5 years old. That was the day you became your father's apprentice, and whatever innocence your scent had vanished in a puff of smoke and soot. Now, your personal fragrance is something between burnt bacon, week-old sweat, iron dust, and mild regret. A perfume no amount of scrubbing can fix. Welcome to the life of a blacksmith, where the fire doesn't just shape the metal, it stains your soul. Permanently. The forge never stops burning. and neither do you. The smoke wraps itself around you like a second skin. It seeps into your hair, your nails, your bones. You could bathe in rosewater for a week and still come out smell like yesterday's fire pit. Even your sweat has changed. It no longer smells human. It smells cooked, like smoked meat that's been forgotten in the sun. But somehow you've learned to live with it, maybe even embrace it. Because that scent, that stink, it's the smell of survival, of grit, of work done the hard way. It's the smell of someone who may be broken, may be tired, but who never ever stopped swinging. The tablet also speaks of the one thing, the source of all creation. A mysterious force both rising from the earth and descending from the sky, carrying within it the power of all things seen and unseen. This one thing was more than a concept. It was a symbol, a secret whispered through ages. Many saw it as the philosopher's stone, the legendary key to transmutation and eternal life. Others understood it as the soul itself, the ethereal breath that animates all matter, or even the very essence of consciousness. Yet, perhaps the greatest mystery wasn't what the tablet revealed, but who could truly grasp its meaning. To understand this sacred riddle, you had to be more than a mere scholar memorizing texts. You had to be a seeker, one willing to journey beyond knowledge into the realm of intuition, where logic falters and mysteries unfold. This riddle, said to be gifted by the god Thoth himself, was destined to outlive the crumbling of Egypt's mighty civilization. Like a sacred torch, it would pass through the hands of many, carried across deserts, mountains, and seas, crossing borders and centuries, from Egypt to Persia, and then spreading to the farthest corners of the world. As Egypt's golden age faded into dust, alchemy did not vanish with it. Instead, it migrated like a living flame, traveling along ancient trade routes. It was carried by scribes whose ink traced the mysteries onto fragile parchments, by mystics who whispered its secrets beneath starlit skies, and by conquerors whose armies unknowingly became vessels of knowledge. In Persia, alchemy did not simply survive, it was reborn, transformed by a unique blend of spiritual fire and profound philosophical insight. The backbone of Persian alchemical thought was deeply rooted in Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic faiths, whose essence lay in the eternal struggle of duality: light battling darkness, truth confronting falsehood, purity resisting corruption. Within this cosmic dance, fire held a sacred place, not merely as a physical element, but as a divine symbol. It burned perpetually in Zoroastrian temples, embodying the divine wisdom that illuminated the soul's path. This sacred fire became the very heart of Persian alchemy, igniting the crucibles where transformation was both physical and spiritual. Yet while spiritual ideas blazed brightly, it was a Greek-Egyptian mystic named Zosimos of Panopolis who gave alchemy its first enduring voice, a voice that still echoes across the corridors of time. Living in Roman Egypt around the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimos was no ordinary philosopher. His writings were a remarkable fusion. Technical manuals describing furnaces, stills, and elixirs intertwined with vivid visionary journeys into realms unseen. In his works, the material and the mystical merged, revealing alchemy not just as a craft of changing metals, but as a sacred art of transforming the self. His words invite us to step beyond the physical laboratory and into a spiritual workshop where the soul itself is refined by fire and revelation. You remember that look. It's the same one you used to give your father, back when he seemed like a mountain, immovable, eternal, carved out of something harder than the rest of the world. But now, standing in his place, you understand the truth he never said aloud. He wasn't made of stone. He was made of exhaustion and responsibility, layered like sediment beneath his skin. Every sigh was a silent sacrifice. Every lesson was a quiet offering to a future he knew he wouldn't get to rest in. And now, it's your turn. You teach the boy everything: how to read heat by color. Cherry red means pliable, white means dangerous, how to tap, not slam. Because metal, like people, responds better to patience than violence. How to listen, really listen, to the sound of the iron. Because it speaks, if you pay attention. You shout sometimes, not out of malice, but momentum. The forge has a rhythm, and your voice has learned to rise above it like a drum beat. Hold it right. That's too cold. Don't cry, it's only a burn. You try to soften things when you can. A story by the fire told slowly like a secret from a gentler world. A piece of dried fruit when you can afford such luxuries, sweetness in a life mostly made of smoke and salt. But tenderness doesn't last long in the forge, not because you don't want it to, but because time burns it away. There's always more work. Always something that needs lifting, shaping, enduring. His hands will soon look like yours, calloused, cracked, blistered before they ever learn softness. His back will ache before his voice even breaks. He'll learn to fall asleep with ringing in his ears and wake before the sun because the work doesn't wait for rest. He'll outgrow his shirt, but not the burn marks, not the memories of heat too close and days too long. And one day, when your knees give out, when your shoulders won't lift, when your lungs wheeze like bellows full of ash, he'll pick up the hammer you can no longer raise. People might say it's unfair, that the cycle should end, that a child should not inherit pain as if it were treasure. But this is how it has always been. A lineage not of royalty or riches, but of soot, steel, and survival. You're not just passing down a trade, you're passing down a legacy. A forge that never cools, a fire that must be kept alive, even if it costs everything. So yes, you raise your son to do it all again, not because you're cruel, but because someone has to keep the fire going. Someone has to remember the language of iron. Someone has to endure. You've spent a lifetime standing too close to flame, swinging too much iron, breathing too little clean air. It was never a question of if your body would fail, just when. And now, it's happening. Your knees creak like old wooden doors caught in a storm. Not just from age, but from a lifetime of bearing more than they were ever built to carry. Your back, once straight as a sword, now bows to time and toil, refusing to stand tall without protest. The strength that once lived in your fingers, the kind that could twist iron and shape steel, now trembles when you lift something as simple as a cup of tea. The forge still roars, but your arms no longer answer with the same fire. The hammer you once wielded like an extension of your soul grows heavier by the day, as if it too senses the time has come to pass from one hand to the next. There's no grand farewell, no blaze of glory, no bard will write your story into song. You don't go out with thunder, you just begin to slow. You start handing off the tasks that once defined you, first the easy ones, then the ones you never thought you'd give away. Your son takes them without question, without complaint, and you start to sit more, watch more, observe with eyes that see both pride and pain. He asks you questions now, ones you've answered 100 times before, but this time your mind falters. The words take longer to form. The memories come with more dust than clarity. The villagers, they still nod when they pass, still show you the quiet respect reserved for those who've given their lives to their craft. But they talk to your son now. They go to him with their broken blades and their dull plows. He's the one with the burned forearms and the blackened nails. He's the one shaping their world now. And somehow, that doesn't hurt. It heals. Because deep down, you're proud. Not in a loud way, but in the way a mountain is proud of the river it shaped. You didn't chase wealth. You never owned land or titles. No shelf of books bore your name. No fine clothes ever hung in your home. But you were needed. You were the hidden engine behind 1,000 moments no one ever noticed. You kept the swords sharp that held back invaders, the wheels spinning that took grain to market, the hinges swinging that held doors to homes and barns and hopes. The farms worked because you did. No one ever clapped for you, but the world moved because you moved. And now you feel the toll. You know you likely won't see 50. Few blacksmiths do. The cost of this life is steep. Lungs blackened from decades of smoke, joints ground down like steel on stone, and a heart worn thin from heat, pressure, and effort too constant to name. But when you're gone, your work remains. In the nails driven into the church doors, in the blades strapped to noble hips, in the hooves of horses shod and ready for the next journey. You leave no legacy of wealth or glory, just tools, old scars, and a son with steady hands and a hammer that remembers your grip. And in your world, that is not just enough, it is everything. They may bury you beneath simple soil, no statue, no song, just a name carved into a slab of wood. But the forge will still burn. And every time a hammer falls and steel sings through the smoke, the village will hear a sound that is unmistakably yours. The sound of you, still working. You were never a knight. You didn't charge into battle beneath a crest, didn't sit atop a war horse with armor gleaming in the sun. You didn't carry a sword made for glory, you made the sword. You were never the hero in the songs, but without your hands, the heroes had nothing to hold. You didn't till the fields or plant the seeds, but the plow that broke the earth, that was yours. The steel teeth that carved the soil open for harvest, they were born in your fire. You didn't bake the bread, but your hands forged the oven doors, sealed the hinges, held the heat. You didn't raise the castle walls, but you gave them strength. Every nail, every bracket, every iron-banded gate carried the echo of your anvil. You were a blacksmith. And in the medieval world, that meant you weren't just a worker, you were the quiet architect of daily life. While nobles quarreled and kings claimed crowns, you stood before the forge, sleeves rolled, face streaked with ash, shaping the unseen, the thousand small things that don't get noticed but make everything possible. Rivets, hinges, horseshoes, braces, bolts, pieces so humble they vanish into the background, but without them, the world falls apart. Your life was loud, iron on iron, fire roaring, but your legacy is silent. No statues bear your likeness, no songs carry your name, but every barn door that opens clean, every wagon wheel that rolls straight, every blade that held its edge when it mattered, that was you. People passed your forge and saw only smoke, smelled only sweat and soot, and thought it was just noise, just heat, just work. But inside, it was a sacred ritual, a symphony of fire and muscle, of transformation. You didn't just shape metal, you shaped civilization. And when your time was done, the fire didn't die. Your son picked up your hammer. Your grandson learned to read the color of the flame. Your name may have slipped from the records, but your tools, your work lived on, passed hand to hand, generation to generation, quietly building the future. You were never crowned, never celebrated, never sung. But without you, nothing moved. No wagons, no armies, no doors to swing open. You were the iron beneath the wood, the heat behind the harvest, the strength behind the sword. You were the ember that made progress possible. The invisible force behind history's grand events. The silent fire that kept the world turning. Long before alchemy became the domain of cloaked mystics in candlelit European labs, muttering over bubbling glass and scrawling cryptic notes and secret codes, it was something far older and infinitely more sacred. Its roots stretch back not to medieval castles, but to the sun-soaked sands of ancient Egypt. There, in a land where the line between the earthly and the divine was thin as papyrus, alchemy was not a science. It was a sacred philosophy, a language of the gods, a way of life. The Egyptians didn't call it alchemy, not yet. They had a word, chemia, drawn from chem, the black land. It referred to the deep, dark soil left behind by the life-giving floods of the Nile. But this wasn't just topography. It wasn't just fertile earth. To the ancient Egyptians, black was the color of potential, of birth, of mystery and transformation. It was the raw, untouched essence of creation itself. In their cosmology, the black land was a living symbol, not just of agriculture, but of the alchemical force that made all life possible. And from that concept, from chemia, came alchemia, and later the word we now know, alchemy. But in Egypt, alchemy wasn't about turning lead into gold. That particular obsession would come much later, filtered through Greco-Roman lenses and medieval dreams of wealth. No, Egyptian alchemy was much more holistic, more cosmic. It wasn't confined to the laboratory. It was found in temples, kitchens, tombs, and stars. It was present in the sacred act of mummification, a ritual not just of preservation, but of transformation. The body of the deceased wasn't simply wrapped and buried. It was transfigured, made eternal. To mummify was to alchemize, to change something mortal into something divine. It was found in the blending of sacred oils, herbs, and minerals by temple priests. Crafting elixirs meant not only to heal the body, but to awaken the spirit. It was in the kneading of dough, the brewing of beer, acts that seemed mundane, but to the Egyptian soul were sacred ceremonies of transformation. Grain became bread, fruit became wine, life became legacy. Transformation, they believed, was not a process limited to matter. It was the very language through which the divine communicated with the world. And this is where Egyptian alchemy differed so profoundly from its later incarnations. It was never purely physical. At its core, it was spiritual. To change a thing outwardly, they believed, you had to understand it inwardly. The transformation of lead into gold was meaningless if it didn't mirror the transformation of the soul into something higher. This principle, that true change starts within, would echo across cultures and centuries. You'll find it whispered in medieval texts, chanted in esoteric orders, and hidden between the lines of cryptic manuscripts. But its roots are here, in Egypt. Some legends even claim that this ancient wisdom wasn't human in origin at all, that it was gifted by a divine being, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, the moon, and magic. It is said Thoth revealed the secrets of creation itself, the laws of transformation, the soul's journey after death, and the mysteries of the heavens. And these secrets, so the story goes, were written down, not on parchment, not on papyrus, but on a single sacred artifact, the Emerald Tablet, a slab of crystalline green stone etched with truth so profound that all of alchemy, from ancient Egypt to Renaissance Europe, could be traced back to its verses. Whether myth or memory, the idea endures, that alchemy began not with gold, but with spirit, not in a lab, but in a temple, and not as a quest for wealth, but as a path toward the divine. But before we get to that, we have to recognize one truth. Alchemy didn't begin as a greedy hunt for gold, nor as some mystical shortcut to wealth. It began as something far deeper, a sacred science of life itself, a way of seeing the world not as a collection of static things, but as a living, breathing process of transformation. In ancient Egypt, alchemy wasn't just a curiosity. It was the very flame that lit the first fires of understanding. It was seen as the original fire, the source from which all other forms of wisdom would eventually flow. And everything that followed, from the illuminated manuscripts of Persia to the smoky laboratories of medieval Paris, would trace its spiritual lineage back to that ancient, fertile land beside the Nile. If Egypt was the birthplace of alchemy, then Thoth was its divine midwife. More than just a mythological figure, Thoth was the embodiment of knowledge, the architect of the cosmos' hidden laws. He wasn't simply a god, he was the god of writing, time, logic, language, equilibrium, and sacred magic. With the head of an ibis and a crescent moon cradled in a solar disk above him, he stood as a bridge between the known and the unknowable. In a world where change was both feared and worshipped, Thoth was the guardian of balance, the silent scribe recording every truth the universe whispered. To the ancient Egyptians, he was not merely divine, he was the voice of divine intelligence itself. They believed he had written thousands of texts, each filled with divine insight, most of which were too sacred for mortal minds to bear. But from that vast well of wisdom, one fragment emerged to shape centuries, the Emerald Tablet. Whispers of the tablet drifted through time like smoke in a temple, a mystery wrapped in green stone, etched not just with words, but with the very pulse of the universe. It was short, barely a dozen lines, but those lines would ripple through the centuries, studied by sages, alchemists, mystics, and dreamers alike. They believed it held the master key, not just to transmuting metals, but to transforming the soul, the world, and the very nature of reality. It begins with a sentence that still echoes like a bell struck in the silence of eternity. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This single line, the principle of correspondence, changed everything. It said that the universe is a mirror, that the vast galaxies turning above us are reflected in the inner workings of our spirit, that the alchemist's fire in the crucible is no different from the fire that shapes stars, that what happens in the heavens is not separate from what stirs in the human heart. The Emerald Tablet didn't offer a recipe for riches, it offered a vision, a worldview. It dared to declare that the world is not static, not frozen, but ever transforming, evolving, refining. Lead could become gold, yes, but more importantly, ignorance could become wisdom. Fear could become clarity. The ordinary could become divine. In the eyes of the alchemist, every failure was raw material. Every shadow held light waiting to be revealed. And within every human being, there was a hidden spark, waiting to be transmuted into something radiant. The tablet also speaks of the one thing, the source of all creation, and how it rises from the earth and descends from the sky, carrying the power of all things in its wake. Many saw this one thing as the philosopher's stone, others as the soul, the ether, or even consciousness itself. But perhaps the greatest mystery wasn't the content of the tablet, but who could understand it. You had to be more than a scholar. You had to be a seeker. And it was this sacred riddle, gifted by Thoth, that would survive the fall of Egypt and pass like a torch across borders and ages, first to Persia, then to the world. As Egypt's golden age faded, alchemy did not vanish. It migrated, traveling along trade routes carried by scribes, mystics, and conquerors. It passed into the hands of another ancient empire, Persia. But this was not merely a transfer of knowledge. In Persia, alchemy underwent a transformation of its own, one that blended spiritual fire with philosophical depth. The backbone of Persian alchemical thought was deeply shaped by Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. At its heart was the concept of duality, a constant battle between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, purity and corruption. Fire, the purest of all elements in Zoroastrian belief, wasn't just a symbol, it was sacred. It burned in temples representing divine wisdom, and that fire would light the crucibles of early Persian alchemists. But while spiritual ideas burned bright, it was a Greek-Egyptian mystic named Zosimos of Panopolis who gave alchemy its first real voice, one that still echoes today. Living in Roman Egypt around the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimos was no ordinary philosopher. His writings fused technical descriptions of furnaces, stills, and elixirs with strange visionary journeys. In his most famous dream, Zosimos does not merely sleep, he journeys inward into a vision of fire, dismemberment, and rebirth. He sees himself torn apart, his body cast into an alchemical furnace, his flesh burned away, and his essence transformed. But this isn't a nightmare. There's no terror in it. Instead, it is divine. It is the symbolic death of the ego, the purification of the soul, a mystical unraveling of the self, where what is base must be destroyed so that something higher may be born. Zosimos didn't believe alchemy was just the art of changing metals. He believed the true alchemist was both the operator and the subject of transformation. Just as lead must be broken down to reveal its hidden gold, the human soul had to suffer, surrender, and pass through the fire to be made whole. For Zosimos, alchemy was not chemistry. It was sacred initiation. He called it a mystery of spirit and matter alike. Centuries ahead of his time, he introduced the concept of spiritual alchemy, the idea that the transmutation of metals was only a mirror for a deeper inner process, the soul's evolution. His texts are filled with strange and powerful symbols: lions devouring serpents, humans dissolving into streams of colored vapor, radiant beings rising from flames. These were not notes for a laboratory. They were maps of the inner world. Every transformation, every fire, every elemental image was a metaphor for the alchemist's journey toward enlightenment. Zosimos also insisted on something most thinkers of his era rarely dared to claim: that true knowledge cannot be bought, memorized, or handed down like gold coins. It must be earned through discipline, through suffering, through the patient unfolding of revelation. The work of alchemy to him was sacred, a path, a calling. And though much of his writing was fragmented, misunderstood, or lost to time, his influence whispered through the ages. His vision reshaped the very idea of what alchemy could be. No longer just a proto-science, it had become a sacred philosophy, a symbolic language for the soul's awakening. As the final embers of Greco-Egyptian mysticism dimmed, a new fire was lit in the East. A golden age was rising. While Europe plunged into the darkness of war, famine, and fear, the Islamic world entered a radiant intellectual renaissance. From the 8th to the 13th century, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became beacons of wisdom. Their libraries overflowed with ancient texts, their streets hummed with discourse. In these cities, disciplines flourished: mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and alchemy. At the heart of this era stood a name that echoed across time: Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber. But Jabir was not merely a chemist, not just a philosopher. He was a fusion of both: a scholar, a seeker, a visionary. Often called the father of chemistry, Jabir's works didn't just build upon the mystical tradition of alchemy, they revolutionized it. He took Zosimos' spiritual insights and combined them with rigorous observation, precise experimentation, and deep philosophical reflection. He created a bridge between the seen and the unseen, the material and the spiritual, the old world and the world to come. And on that bridge, science itself was born. Working in the glittering courts of the Abbasid Caliphate during the 8th century, an era when Baghdad pulsed with scholarship, poetry, and power, Jabir ibn Hayyan approached alchemy not as mysticism, but as discipline. Where others saw mystery, he saw method. He treated alchemy like a science long before the term existed, rooting it in observation, experimentation, and repeatable process. He pioneered laboratory techniques that are still recognizable today. Distillation, crystallization, sublimation, words we now associate with chemistry classrooms, but which in his time were nothing short of revolutionary. Jabir didn't just practice alchemy, he transformed it. He refined acids, crafted new apparatus, and authored over 100 texts that wove together philosophy, logic, and hands-on experimentation. But Jabir never severed the soul from the substance. To him, the universe was not just a machine, it was a mystery. He believed everything was composed of 4 elemental forces: earth, air, fire, and water, each infused with spiritual significance. His system was a delicate blend of numerology, astrology, and sacred symbolism. Every chemical reaction mirrored an inner transformation. Every external change reflected an inward journey. At the heart of his philosophy was mizan, balance. Just as a healthy body requires internal harmony, so too must metals achieve equilibrium to be perfected. In this vision, gold was not just a metal, it was matter in perfect balance, the alchemical ideal. If balance could be engineered slowly, precisely, with patience, then even the most common, corrupted substance could be transformed. What was base could become beautiful. What was flawed could be refined. Jabir's legacy didn't stop at the borders of the Islamic world. His writings were translated into Latin and smuggled across cultures, sometimes reverently, sometimes carelessly. By the time his ideas reached medieval Europe, many alchemists there had no idea they were drawing from the mind of a Persian genius, but they were. His fingerprints were everywhere, in their symbols, their formulas, their sacred fire. Through Jabir ibn Hayyan, alchemy took a decisive step towards science. It was no longer just an esoteric art, it was a system, a method, a bridge between worlds. And yet it never lost its soul. It remained what it had always been at its deepest level, a map for transformation, not just of metals, but of the self. As the Islamic world became a beacon of preserved and expanded ancient knowledge, Europe remained adrift, cloaked in dogma, fearful of inquiry. But knowledge has a way of leaking through the cracks, especially when it's too powerful to contain. Alchemy began its quiet migration westward, piece by piece, manuscript by manuscript. The bridge between East and West was built not by empires, but by cities of learning. Alexandria, once home to the Great Library, Toledo and Cordoba in Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus, where in rare moments of intellectual peace, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars sat together over the same texts, driven by the same hunger. In these centers of light, translators worked tirelessly, decoding Arabic texts, rediscovering the ancient wisdom of Zosimos, Aristotle, and Jabir himself. They weren't just translating, they were resurrecting. Ideas once buried beneath the weight of fear and fire were being reborn in ink. By the 12th century, Europe was no longer just ready, it was starving, and when Jabir's teachings arrived, they didn't just inform, they detonated. But what arrived in Europe was never just the practical science of chemistry alone. It was alchemy in its fullest, most profound form, a fusion of spirit, matter, and meaning that transcended mere experimentation. This was a discipline where the physical and the metaphysical intertwined, a sacred art as much as a science. Monasteries, those bastions of learning and faith, began to conceal strange and cryptic manuscripts behind the pages of sacred scripture. Within candlelit chambers, monks not only sought to purify metals, but aimed to purify their own souls. The clang of hammer against anvil echoed the deeper, invisible quest for transformation. In these hidden studies, the minds of medieval Europe became captivated by a singular, powerful concept: transmutation. The idea that the lowliest base metals could be transformed into shining gold mirrored a more profound hope, that the human soul too could be purified, elevated, and perfected. Among the influential texts that journeyed into Europe was the Turba Philosophorum, or Assembly of the Philosophers, a mysterious and ancient dialogue where sages debated the deepest secrets of nature and existence. Alongside it came the Pekatrix, a vast and enigmatic Arabic grimoire overflowing with astrological knowledge and alchemical symbolism. These texts did not merely transmit chemical recipes, they carried entire worldviews, a vision of the cosmos where spirit and matter were one, and every element held hidden meaning. The Latin translations of these arcane writings circulated quietly, often disguised as religious or philosophical treatises, cautiously avoiding the watchful eyes of the church, which regarded such ideas with suspicion and fear. Alchemy was dangerous. It challenged the fixed, hierarchical order of the world. If lead could become gold, then what else was possible? Could a peasant rise to nobility? Could a mortal man transcend his nature and become divine? Despite the church's wariness, alchemy's allure was irresistible. It promised a secret path to perfection, one outside the bounds of dogma and earthly authority. By the late Middle Ages, Europe had taken up the torch once carried by the ancient civilizations of Egypt, Persia, and Baghdad. That same flame now flickered in the dim halls of castles, cloistered monasteries, and the shadowy chambers of secret societies. Alchemy had crossed a threshold, and it was on the brink of evolving into something even greater. By this time, alchemy in Europe had transformed from a mere intellectual exercise into a near-mythic, holy quest. At the heart of this quest lay a single enigmatic object, the Philosopher's Stone. The stone was far more than a chemical substance. It was a mystery enshrouded in allegory, encoded in complex symbols and cloaked in riddles. Legend spoke of its power to transmute base metals into pure gold and to grant immortality through the elusive elixir of life. It became the most coveted and elusive artifact in Western esoteric tradition. Yet, to those alchemists who grasped its deeper truth, the Philosopher's Stone was not a mere physical object. It was spiritual, a symbol of inner transformation and enlightenment. In the countless alchemical manuscripts, the stone bore many names. Lapis philosophorum, the red stone, the powder of projection. Some believed it to be a literal red crystalline substance, shimmering with otherworldly power. Others understood it as a metaphor, a representation of spiritual awakening and the ultimate perfection of the soul. But all agreed it was the key to ultimate transformation. Alchemists believed the universe itself was a living organism, constantly striving toward perfection. Metals, too, were alive, growing slowly in the womb of the earth. Lead was simply immature gold, and just as nature evolved toward balance, man could evolve as well. The Philosopher's Stone was the accelerant of that evolution. European alchemists like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and later, Paracelsus devoted their lives to understanding the processes of nature in pursuit of this ultimate truth. They built furnaces, studied astrology, collected rare minerals, and wrote cryptic texts filled with serpents, suns, dragons, and kings, all metaphors for the stages of inner and outer transformation. The stone's creation was said to follow a path called the magnum opus, or the great work. It began with nigredo, the blackening symbolic of death, decay, and the breaking down of ego. Then came albedo, the whitening, purification. Then citrinitas, the yellowing, illumination. And finally, rubereddening, rebirth and the emergence of the stone. But why hide this process in metaphor? Because true transformation, alchemists believed, wasn't meant for the uninitiated. The stone would reveal itself only to those who were ready, not just intellectually, but spiritually. To seek the stone was to seek perfection. And while many searched for gold, the wisest alchemists knew the only thing worth perfecting was the soul. As alchemy took deeper root in medieval Europe, it began to slip into the shadows. What was once open dialogue in temples and scholarly exchanges in courts now became hidden practice. The reasons were many: religious scrutiny, political fear, and the simple fact that alchemy's language had become a secret code, decipherable only to the initiated. The church, wielding enormous power, saw in alchemy both promise and danger. While some Christian mystics embraced it, seeing the transmutation of metals as a mirror of Christ's resurrection, others condemned it. The idea that man could manipulate nature, even achieve spiritual ascension outside of divine grace, was heretical. To avoid persecution, alchemists cloaked their teachings in allegory and symbolism. Thus began an era where alchemy went underground, hiding in secret societies and coded manuscripts, and obscure symbols that only insiders could interpret. The Rosicrucians, a mysterious brotherhood that surfaced in the 17th century, claimed to hold ancient alchemical wisdom passed down from Egypt and Arabia. Their manifesto spoke of spiritual enlightenment, divine harmony, and the hidden sciences. Though no one could prove their existence, their ideas spread like wildfire, inspiring generations of seekers. Then there were the Freemasons, whose roots traced back to stone builders, but whose rituals echoed deeply with alchemical philosophy. purification, transformation, inner light. Whether or not they practiced alchemy in the literal sense, their symbolic language aligned perfectly with its aims, the building of the perfect self. Alchemy also found refuge in books of secrets, texts like the Mutus Liber, which contained no words, only a series of strange, symbolic images meant to communicate the great work without uttering a single sentence. Other manuscripts were written in green language, a form of wordplay, puns, and poetic double meanings that concealed their deeper truths. The alchemist's life had become one of duality. Outwardly a scholar, physician, or monk, quiet and obedient. Inwardly a revolutionary, chasing the divine through fire and metal, spirit and stone. The very secrecy that threatened alchemy also preserved it. Like a fire buried beneath ash, it smoldered unseen, passed down from master to apprentice, generation to generation. And in these quiet shadows, alchemy continued to evolve, not just as an early science, but as a living philosophy, one that would soon encounter its greatest challenge, the birth of modern chemistry. By the 17th and 18th centuries, a quiet revolution was brewing, one that would both inherit and bury the legacy of alchemy. The Age of Enlightenment had arrived. The mysticism and metaphor that once cloaked alchemical thought were no longer welcomed in scholarly halls. In their place came a new language, empiricism, logic, and repeatable results. Alchemy's successor had arrived. Its name was chemistry. This wasn't an abrupt execution. It was a slow, methodical transformation. Many of the earliest chemists were, in fact, alchemists. They simply shifted focus. The goal was no longer spiritual perfection or the transmutation of souls, but measurable change. No more dragons and black suns, just beakers, balances, and precise documentation. One of the final nails in the coffin came with Robert Boyle, often called the father of modern chemistry. In his 1661 book, The Skeptical Chemist, Boyle argued that matter was made up of atoms, and that chemical reactions could be explained without mystical forces. He didn't mock alchemy, but he stripped it of its esoteric language. Boyle believed in the alchemist's power to transform, but insisted it must be explained through natural laws, not allegory. Soon after, Antoine Lavoisier would discover the role of oxygen in combustion and disprove the ancient theory of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The periodic table would follow. Laboratories became secular temples of knowledge. Alchemy, with its hidden codes and sacred metaphors, was seen as outdated, an embarrassment to real science. But here's the paradox. But chemistry owed its very existence to alchemy. The tools, the techniques, the curiosity, it all came from the furnace of that ancient craft. Alchemy had walked so that chemistry could run. Still, the world was changing. Industrialization demanded results, not riddles. Governments funded laboratories, not lodges. The philosopher's stone was replaced by the microscope, the alembic by the Bunsen burner. What was once sacred had become material. Yet not all was lost in hidden corners. And in quiet minds, alchemy still breathed, not as a rigid science, but as a living symbol. A symbol of transformation, of unity, of the eternal dance between matter and spirit. While the world turned to chemistry for answers, some still looked to alchemy for meaning. Because some fires never go out, they just burn beneath the surface, quietly, persistently. Alchemy may have vanished from the grand halls of science, but it never truly died. Instead, it transformed, just as it always taught that all things must. What began in the shadowed tombs of Egypt, refined in the fiery temples of Persia, and encoded within the secret texts of medieval Europe, didn't simply disappear. It evolved, splintering into chemistry, psychology, medicine, and even modern spirituality. Its outward form was shed, but its inner message endured. In the 20th century, a new kind of alchemist emerged, not wielding a furnace, but a notebook and a mind full of dreams. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, rediscovered the hidden wisdom of alchemy and breathed new life into its ancient symbols. He argued that the ancient alchemists weren't just transforming metals, they were unconsciously mapping the human psyche. The blackening, nigredo, was depression. The whitening, albedo, was insight. The reddening, rubedo, was the birth of a unified self. The philosopher's stone, Jung said, was individuation, the process of becoming whole. Alchemy, it turned out, had always been about more than gold. Today we see its fingerprints everywhere, in self-help books preaching transformation, in stories of heroes who descend into darkness only to return reborn, in the very language we use. Words like refine, distill, purify, all echoes of the alchemist's ancient path. Even in science, the spirit of alchemy lingers. Chemists still transmute elements in nuclear reactors. Physicists speak of dark matter and unified fields with the same wonder alchemists once had for ether. And quintessence, the search for the fundamental building blocks of the universe, continues. Only the language has changed. But perhaps the true legacy of alchemy lies in its insistence on wholeness. It never separated spirit from matter or science from mystery. It taught that the transformation of the world begins with the transformation of the self, that behind every experiment was a sacred question. Who are you becoming in the process? In a world driven by speed, by technology, by the cold precision of data, alchemy whispers an ancient truth. To change anything truly, you must also be willing to change yourself. And so the alchemist's fire still burns, not in crucibles, but in hearts, waiting, calling, transforming. Because alchemy was never just a science, it was a mirror. At first glance, Cappadocia seems like a surreal painting, its surface dotted with towering stone chimneys and rippling ridges carved by wind and time. Tourists marvel at the strange beauty above, but what most never realize is that the real wonder lies beneath their feet. Deep under this Turkish landscape is a forgotten world, a labyrinth of subterranean cities stretching for miles. These aren't simple caves or makeshift shelters. There are entire urban complexes hidden underground, complete with residences, chapels, wells, food storage, stables, and even schools. Some go down as far as 18 stories, housing thousands of people in the shadows of the earth. The most astonishing part? Many of these cities were completely unknown until the mid-20th century. In 1963, a man renovating his home in the town of Derinkuyu knocked down a wall in his basement. What he found behind it wasn't brick or dirt, it was a tunnel. That tunnel led to another, then to a chamber, then to a spiral staircase. He had accidentally uncovered an ancient entrance to one of the largest underground cities in the world. It was as if an entire civilization had chosen to vanish beneath the ground, leaving behind no sign except silence. But Derinkuyu was just one of many. Over the decades, archaeologists have identified hundreds of underground settlements throughout Cappadocia, at least 40 major ones, interconnected through narrow corridors. And secret escape routes, these weren't random burrows. They were deliberately planned and engineered. Massive stone doors could seal off passageways from the inside. Ventilation shafts brought fresh air from the surface. Wells tapped into underground aquifers, ensuring fresh water even under siege. Why would anyone build something so elaborate under the earth? That question has haunted historians for years, sparking countless theories and debates. Were these sprawling subterranean cities simply hiding spots, secret refuges from invading armies? Monastic sanctuaries where spiritual seekers escaped the turmoil above? Or perhaps they were something far older, far stranger, a hidden world layered beneath the known, sheltering entire communities from threats lost to time. Whatever the reason, one thing remains undeniable. Cappadocia was not just a region, it was a refuge, a world beneath a world. A place where thousands could disappear from the surface, vanishing into labyrinths of stone, to live their lives entirely underground. And the deeper you delve into these ancient cities, the stranger their story becomes. To truly understand why these underground marvels were built, you have to first understand the land itself. Cappadocia is no ordinary terrain. Millions of years ago, violent volcanic eruptions buried central Turkey beneath thick blankets of ash. Over time, this ash hardened into a soft, porous rock known as tuff, a remarkable material, light enough to carve with simple tools, yet sturdy enough to hold its shape through centuries of weather and wear. Rain and wind shaped that tuff into breathtaking formations. Fairy chimneys, rising like stone spires, conical towers reaching skyward, mushroom-like pinnacles that seemed plucked from a dream or another planet entirely. But the ancient people who settled here didn't just marvel at this landscape, they mastered it. They saw the volcanic stone as a precious gift, a material they could carve homes, chapels, storage rooms, even entire complexes from, all without lumber or bricks. Unlike the fragile surface dwellings exposed to the elements, these underground chambers remained cool through scorching summers and warm throughout bitter winters. Above ground, churches were carved into cliff faces, blending with the rocky cliffs like echoes of faith carved in stone. But it was below ground where the true magic unfolded. What likely began as simple caves, small shelters to store food, escape the blazing sun, or seek refuge from storms, slowly transformed over generations. As threats grew and communities expanded, these humble caves grew too. They evolved into interconnected rooms, then multi-level complexes, then vast networks stretching beneath the earth like veins of stone. Once the digging began, it never stopped. Entire societies vanished beneath the soil, carving deeper and deeper. Not haphazardly, but with purpose, design, and intention. Each tunnel, chamber, and staircase a testament to human resilience and the profound will to survive and thrive, even when the world above was anything but safe. Tunnels connected homes to kitchens, stables to wells, rooms to chapels. They created ventilation shafts that reached the surface and filtered fresh air through multiple stories. They even dug vertical staircases wide enough for people and livestock, yet narrow enough to defend. What's truly incredible is how ancient these structures may be. While many underground cities were expanded during the Byzantine era, some archaeologists believe that the original levels, especially in places like Derinkuyu and Kaimakli, could date back to the Hittite Empire or even earlier, around 2000 BCE. This land invited transformation, and the people of Cappadocia responded by shaping it, not with machines, but with patience and vision, and survival in mind. The earth wasn't just a foundation, it was a shelter, a fortress, a second sky, only inverted and filled with secrets. But what exactly were they hiding from? That's the question explored next. Beneath the quiet town of Derinkuyu lies something extraordinary, a city not above the earth, but deep beneath it. A city that no one even knew existed until 1963, when a man doing simple renovations in his home knocked down a wall and found a dark tunnel stretching beyond sight. That tunnel led to chambers. The chambers led to corridors. Staircases spiraled downward into the rock, leading from room to room, level to level, until eventually explorers found themselves standing 18 stories beneath the surface. They had uncovered Derinkuyu, the largest and deepest underground city ever found in Cappadocia, and possibly the world. What archaeologists found was staggering. This wasn't a temporary hideout or an emergency shelter. Derinkuyu was a living city, carved entirely out of volcanic stone. It had homes, churches, communal kitchens, wine and oil presses, storage rooms, schools, even a baptismal chamber. It could house an estimated 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. It was engineered with remarkable precision. Massive rolling stone doors, shaped like millstones, could be pushed to seal off tunnels in case of attack. These weren't simple blocks. They were perfectly fitted, movable from the inside, and nearly impossible to force open from the outside. Ventilation shafts snaked upward through the rock, channeling precious fresh air down into the belly of the earth. Some ran dozens of meters tall, narrow and smooth, like stone chimneys, breathing life into the subterranean dark. They reached even the lowest levels, chambers buried up to 18 stories beneath the surface, and somehow without fans, without electricity, without modern engineering, they worked. Gravity, pressure, and brilliant placement did what machines wouldn't accomplish for centuries. And water? That too was solved. Wells dug deep into the stone tapped into natural aquifers, delivering clean water straight into the underground city, without anyone ever needing to surface. In times of siege or fear, it meant life could continue below, uninterrupted and unseen. But what's even more surprising is what these cities contained beyond mere survival necessities. In Derinkuyu, one of the most extraordinary underground cities in the world, archaeologists uncovered what appears to be a mission school, study rooms, shared spaces for learning and worship. This wasn't just about hiding, it was about continuing. Culture, teaching, faith, community. It was about life. And yet, for all the wonders carved into the rock, a haunting question remains: who built it? Here's what makes Derinkuyu so mysterious. We still don't know for sure who first hollowed out its vast, winding depths. Some believe early Christians expanded the city as a refuge from Roman or Arab persecution. Others argue that the foundations go back much further, perhaps to the Phrygians or even the Hittites, civilizations that walked the earth thousands of years before Christ. So then, why? Why go to such extraordinary lengths to vanish beneath the surface? Was it to escape armies, as many assume? To evade slavery, conquest, or death? Or was the threat something else entirely? Something not human? Because Derinkuyu holds no inscriptions, no names, no origin story, just hollowed out stone, labyrinthine tunnels, and silence. And the deeper you go, the stranger it feels. Less like a city, more like something ancient and otherworldly. Building downward is one of the most difficult feats in architecture. Unlike building up, there is no scaffolding, no light, no easy margin for error. You're working in darkness, carving through dense volcanic rock, every chamber a risk, every tunnel a gamble. And yet, the builders of Cappadocia's underground cities didn't just dig, they designed. With brilliance, with purpose, with a kind of wisdom we're still trying to understand. These weren't panicked escape routes, they were intricate, layered ecosystems, structured like an onion, with each level fulfilling a distinct role. Near the surface, the living quarters, compact, efficient, and positioned for quick escape should danger pass. Deeper down, communal kitchens, complete with clay ovens, food storage carved into cool rock walls, workshops for metal and wood, even pens for animals, carefully placed to control waste, fire hazards, and disease. Nothing was random, nothing was careless. This was survival turned into architecture, a civilization poured into stone, and the more we uncover, the more it becomes clear. These cities weren't just shelters from danger, they were sanctuaries of resilience. They were blueprints for how to endure, quietly, deeply, and completely, and brilliant design. Water, the most basic necessity, was ingeniously secured. The underground cities of Cappadocia were not just carved for shelter, they were engineered for survival. Built around natural aquifers, they ensured that even during the longest sieges, no one needed to surface. Wells were dug deep and accessed from within, tucked safely behind stone walls and shadowed corridors. In some of these cities, the well shafts were intentionally sealed off from the surface, not out of paranoia, but out of hard-earned wisdom, to keep enemies from poisoning the only source of life in the dark. It was precaution born of experience, from generations who had learned to trust nothing that came from above during times of war. Communication tunnels ran like arteries beneath the earth, some leading to smaller chambers, storage rooms, or sanctuaries, others stretching miles to neighboring underground settlements. In moments of danger, people and messages didn't travel across land, they moved through it. The earth became both barrier and bridge. Defense mechanisms were deceptively simple, but devastatingly effective. Corridors were deliberately narrow, forcing invaders to approach single file, a tactical disadvantage that turned every footstep into a gamble. Trapdoors could drop attackers into pits or dead ends. Hidden escape tunnels snaked out into valleys, forests, even dry riverbeds, offering silent exit when the main paths were overrun. And then, of course, there were the rolling stone doors. Massive circular slabs carved to fit perfectly into entryways, often weighing hundreds of kilograms. From the outside, they were invisible, indistinguishable from the stone walls. But from the inside, they could be rolled into place in seconds, sealing off a passage completely. No key, no handle, just one last chance at survival. Every decision, every feature of these cities whispered the same truth. These weren't temporary shelters. They were long-term habitats, built not just to hide, but to endure. Weeks, months, even years underground. That was the reality these builders were preparing for. Which leads to the deeper, darker question. What kind of danger requires this level of preparation? And even more chilling, was that danger ever truly gone? For centuries, archaeologists, historians, and travelers have all asked the same haunting question. Who were the people of Cappadocia hiding from? What threat was so relentless, so terrifying that entire communities chose to vanish into stone rather than risk the open sky? The most accepted explanation points to invaders. Central Anatolia was a corridor of conquest, passed over by Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and more. The soil of Cappadocia has been soaked in centuries of conflict. Later, during the early Islamic period, Arab raids swept through the region, driving Christian populations to seek safety underground. Cities like Derinkuyu and Kaymaklı may have been sanctuaries during these turbulent times, where entire towns could retreat, lock the doors, and wait in silence until the storm passed. But there's a problem. The depth, complexity, and sheer scale of these underground cities suggest they weren't built in a rush. This wasn't a desperate act, it was a long-term plan requiring generations of digging, engineering, and refinement. Some of the deepest chambers appear to predate Christianity entirely. So who built the first layers? Some historians trace the earliest tunnels back to the Hittite Empire, nearly 4,000 years ago. Others suggest the Phrygians may have expanded them. But beyond these educated guesses, the record grows silent. There are no inscriptions, no carvings, no direct evidence telling us who first vanished beneath the surface or what they were running from. That's where the theories begin. Some believe these cities were built not to escape other people, but something else. Natural disasters, solar events, even ancient warfare that may have scarred the skies and poisoned the land. More fringe theories go deeper, suggesting that the cities were built to hide from beings not of this world. The kind of beings spoken of in myths across cultures. Sky gods, watchers, destroyers. The idea is tempting if you look at the level of secrecy, the air shafts disguised from view, the escape routes, the stone doors. It almost feels like the builders were trying to disappear completely, as if whatever they feared didn't just attack, it hunted. While these ideas remain speculative, they reflect a central mystery. No matter how many layers archaeologists uncover, the core question remains unanswered. Who were they hiding from, and did it work? Because sometimes the deeper you dig, the darker the truth becomes. Imagine living not just a day, but months, maybe even years, entirely underground. No sunlight, no open skies, just stone walls, flickering oil lamps, and the ever-present hush of life beneath the earth. This was reality for thousands in Cappadocia during times of threat. But what did daily life actually look like inside these vast underground cities? Despite the darkness, these spaces weren't lifeless. They were alive with routine, carefully structured for communal survival. Families lived in multi-room compartments. Kitchens were located on lower levels to manage smoke more efficiently, and food was cooked in clay ovens. The scent of baked bread likely mixed with the damp smell of stone and livestock. There were churches and chapels carved with crosses and altars, some even containing intricate frescoes. People didn't just survive here. They prayed, worshipped, and practiced rituals. There were communal areas for meetings, schooling rooms for children, and long corridors that echoed with voices and footsteps. Lighting came from oil lamps, dozens of them scattered along the passageways. Smoke was channeled through cleverly designed shafts that doubled as ventilation. Yet life here wasn't easy. Fresh air was limited, darkness was constant, and silence, when it fell, was absolute. Water was drawn from deep wells tunneled into aquifers. Grain was stored in sealed chambers to prevent spoilage. Wine presses and olive oil vats have been found carved into the rock, suggesting that even underground life had flavor and ritual. The cities were built for the long haul. They weren't a last resort, they were a prepared reality. Livestock, sheep, goats, chickens, were kept in dedicated pens, usually near the entrance levels for easier management and ventilation. Their presence served a dual purpose: food and warmth. Despite the confined spaces, the builders understood the psychology of survival. Rooms were laid out in ways that gave families privacy, while shared spaces fostered a deep sense of community and connection. Life underground wasn't simply about hiding, it was about preserving a way of life, a culture, and a people. It's a humbling thought. While wars raged fiercely above, entire civilizations quietly continued below, hidden in silence, steadfast and enduring. People married, taught their children, mourned their dead, all within stone chambers flickering with firelight. To live underground was not to live in fear. It was to live with intention, with purpose. Cappadocia's underground cities weren't isolated pockets of refuge. They were part of something far greater, a vast, interconnected network. Beneath the valleys and hills of this volcanic region lies a sprawling labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, woven like veins beneath the earth, carrying the lifeblood of a forgotten world. So, after this journey from the fiery forge of the blacksmith to the transformative world of alchemy and chemistry, we ask you, are you satisfied with what you've just experienced? Has this story sparked something within you? A new understanding? A fresh inspiration? If you enjoyed this video, please leave your thoughts and comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay connected and inspired. And before you go, we want to wish you a peaceful, restful night. May your dreams be as rich and transformative as the stories we've shared today. Good night, and see you in the next video.